Go ahead, Lynn.
Okay, welcome everyone tonight to Together Women Rise's March webinar. I think we have just a couple new women joining us tonight. So I'm going to give a very, very quick intro to Together Women Rise. Together Women Rise is a powerful community of women and allies dedicated to achieving global gender equality. We have more than 400 chapters across the United States where members learn about gender equality issues, give grants to organizations that empower women and girls in low-income countries, and build community to forge connections with each other and with women around the world. For those of you who new, never fear. You could get involved with Together Women Rise in many ways or in almost no ways. It's totally up to you.
Is this better? Is this better?
And you can join a local chapter. You can start a chapter, as I know several of you, more than several of you on this call have done. You can participate in our book club discussions. You can travel with us. Tanzania is coming up, and I think still has some openings. Lindy, I think you're going with me to Jordan. I'm very excited about that. And you can also serve on the advocacy chapter. This is our monthly national webinar, and I'm Lynn O'Connell, the board chair. And now a few instructions that I think after 2 years of COVID, we all know. But if you look down at the toolbar, you can mute and unmute yourself on the far left if you're using a normal desktop. And I think everybody knows that they're welcome to put their name and what chapter they're with in the chat box, and also communicate with friends and soon to be friends. Then come up and click on view, and you can click on gallery view, which I like because I can see everyone, or you can also click on speaker view. And you may want to click on speaker view now, because I am thrilled, honored, overjoyed to announce to you our new CEO, Beverly Francis Gibson. She has more than 25 years of experience with nonprofits and in the grant making world. She comes to us from Hanover, Maryland, where she was president and CEO of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America. And she has years and years of work with women and girls. I'll turn it over to you, Beverly.
Thank you so much, Lynn. It is my pleasure to join you this evening. This is actually, yes, my first, I think, public event since I started on Tuesday, March 1st, which is also Women's History Month. So I thought it was really befitting that I am beginning my journey with Together Women's Rise on March 1st. I appreciate the warm welcome that I've received from so many of you already. And I have been in Greenville all week and have had the opportunity to meet with our hardworking staff and just have a better understanding and appreciation of all of the hard work that goes into what you're doing in your respective chapters. I look forward to meeting all of you, if not virtually, face to face at some point. We just need COVID to behave so that I can get around the country and participate in your events. And I also look forward to being a part of the webinar tonight and hearing more from Margaret and Sarah and the great work that they're doing with their organizations. If you need to reach me, my email is beverly@togetherwomenrise.org. And Wendy's going to make sure that information gets out to all of you. But I am here to serve, and I love what the organization has already done. And my goal is that we grow and we become bigger and better, and we help more and more and more women and girls all over the world. So thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you, Beverly. We echo everything you've said and really appreciate it. So now on to what we have to present this month. Every month, we feature a project that addresses one of the many challenges faced by women and girls in low-income countries around the world. As most of you know, we give a featured grant every month between $35,000 and $50,000. And then we come together both on this webinar and in our local chapters around the country to learn about the nonprofit, the girls in the country, the challenges, and how the project's helping women and girls work toward global gender equality. Our February program and our March program are both focused on mental health needs of survivors of gender-based violence. And each of them use a very different approach to treatment and recovery. As we know, gender-based violence is one of the most prevalent issues faced by women and girls around the world, and it can have lifelong repercussions on the survivors. The topics raised by these projects are difficult for some people to discuss, and please consider your own well-being before engaging in the content tonight and throughout the next few months. This month, we're partnering with the Center for Victims of Torture Project and funding mental health services for survivors of trauma and torture. First, we're going to share the short video, and then I'll be pleased to introduce you to the guest speaker tonight.
For 35 years, the Center for Victims of Torture has helped survivors of torture around the world in locations in Ethiopia, Jordan, Kenya, Uganda, and the United States. CVT is specialized in mental health care and focuses on healing those who experience significant trauma from war or torture. At CVT Uganda, we have worked for more than 10 years providing care to survivors of Lord Resistance Army. This is the LRA war. During this war, many people, including children, were abducted from their homes and subjected to violence. CVT extends high quality, effective, and mental health services to heal survivors through small group counseling sessions. My name is Jacqueline. I am a psychosocial counselor working here in CVT Gulu. So today I left home. I left at 8:30. I was in office. I came, found some colleagues in the office, in the compound, and I had to already look through my plan, the activities that I am supposed to do in the field. So I had to pack my things, the manual, the intake forms, the screening forms, the consent form, and pack them in the box that I usually use for documents. Here today I have two activities that I am going to conduct or participate in. One is going to be intake assessment. These clients, we've already done their sensitization and screening. Today I am coming for intake assessment. And in the intake assessment, I am getting deeper information about this client, the kind of experiences the person went through. And then it helps me to understand the severity of the problem of the client. This is where I try to assess the level of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress symptoms. So this is generally what I am going to do during intake assessment. I'll leave here and then go to another location, which is about 2 kilometers away from where I am now, to conduct a group counseling session.
I'm Achan Josephine Grace. I'm working for the Center for Victims of Torture as a psychosocial counselor. Some words, most of the time that client do say, for us we conduct our session from session 1 to session 10. So mostly in session 9, that part touches the client so much, because there we introduce the metaphor of the tree. There's a tree with cut branches, and it has a root that is still making it to stand strong. So by viewing that tree together with them, and later on if we ask the question that, what do you understand, or what do this tree mean to you, then they will begin to say that, for me, at the beginning, I was like this tree. My branches are cut off. So right now I feel that I'm growing because I can see this tree, even the stem are coming up. So much as I'm wounded, but I'm growing like this tree. I'm still having a lot to do in the community. Sometimes they mention their roots being their strength, their clan, their parents, and their fruits, what they do. Sometimes they say that my courage, ability to persevere, ability to strengthen. So by mentioning that, I feel it really very empowering, because that is the situation whereby they will begin to feel what? Reliable, secure, and connecting with community to start what? Rebuilding their lives, the lost life that were what? Were once destroyed, and gaining hope for the future. So this, I find it very touching for me.
My name is Margaret Juliet. I'm a counseling supervisor at the Center for Victims of Torture here in Uganda. Here at CVT, my work mostly surrounds our clients. I work mostly in the field, in the villages, where we find victims of torture from the LRA war. My work entails mostly psychological interventions, which involves individual counseling as well as group counseling. We mostly do groups when we are in the field. Sometimes I participate in the trainings, preparing materials and conducting small parts of the training together with the psychotherapist trainer and the associate psychotherapist trainer. Basically, this is the work that I do here at CVT.
So here I am going to conduct group session of 10 female, and usually it's very interactive, and how they're feeling now that they're in the session. Behind me are my colleagues, fellow counselors. The session was quite interesting for me. Though I came a bit late, leaving from the other location, coming here, and I was already feeling anxious. Lucky enough, I came and found the members were already around. From there, I'll close and move back to Gulu.
Powerful video. Thank you. Thank you to all. So now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for the evening, Sarah Novak, Strategic Partnerships Officer with the Center for Victims of Torture. Sarah has worked with nonprofits and international organizations for more than 9 years. She joined CVT in 2017 and previously worked as a math teacher in Tanzania with the Peace Corps. Sarah has a Master's of Public Policy from the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs, as well as a bachelor's degree in Statistics and Actuarial Science from the University of Minnesota, Duluth. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you all for being here and watching the video. And I also want to thank you for just kind of reminding us how heavy some of these topics are. And I want to remind us all again to really take care of ourselves, take a break if you need to. I personally like to pay attention to my breath, because as we get into these topics, I find that sometimes I'm holding my breath, and I really just need to remember to fully exhale that out and really just take a deep breath if I need to. So you just saw our video about our Uganda program, which is conducted in Gulu, and that is located in the northern region of Uganda, about 200 miles north of Kampala, of the capital. The goal of this work is to provide counseling to survivors of the Lord's Resistance Army, or the LRA, and to provide training to local therapists so that together we can all reach more survivors. And I would like to tell you a story about one of our clients named Joan. and her childhood was very different from what we might have experienced. She did not go to school, she did not ride her bike, and she did not annoy her siblings. She was just a young girl at the age of 10 when Joan was abducted by the LRA, which is an extremist organization that brutalized northern Uganda for more than 10 years. Instead of going to school, the LRA stole Joan from her home and forced her to witness torture and the murder of her family. Instead of playing with her friends, Joan grew up as a prisoner of the LRA. She was tortured and raped over and over again. The LRA stole Joan's childhood and her innocence, but the nightmare didn't end there. She finally escaped the LRA's control, and Joan made it home safely. But instead of being welcomed home by her family and her community, she was shunned because during captivity, she was raped and had a baby. The same people that she longed to be reunited with rejected her because of the awful things that she was forced to do by the LRA. The pain of her imprisonment and torture was just made worse by feelings of shame and stigma that her community placed upon her. Despite all she endured, Joan wanted a better life. She got married and she was blessed with 3 more children, but she could never escape the past that she experienced during LRA captivity. She felt alone and she blamed herself. Sadly, Joan is not alone. There's over 50,000 survivors of the LRA throughout northern Uganda. And in 2009, CBT began working in Gulu to address the needs of these survivors. And we started as a capacity building program, really training other organizations, but we saw the need grow for our care. And so in 2015, we started providing counseling services ourselves alongside training other organizations to do this work. We designed a program specifically to help survivors like Joan, and we offer a 10-week group counseling model where survivors can meet other survivors in a safe and welcoming place. And Joan felt that she was finally accepted once she got to CBT group counseling. And after so many years of pain and isolation, she finally found acceptance. Over the course of a 10-week cycle, Joan's demeanor changed. She was the first to arrive for group sessions. She was no longer fearful or withdrawn, and she laughed with those around her freely. And instead of shame, she felt a lot of joy. Gabrielle, one of our psychotherapists, who if you watch our video, our interview on Together Women's Rights website, you'll see Gabrielle. He likes to describe CBT's work as being a bridge for clients. So when survivors start to look for help, they're walking along a path, and then all of a sudden they come to a treacherous river, and instead of turning back, they find CBT, and CBT helps them get safely across to the other side and continue on in their healing journey. So while CBT has an office in Gulu, as you saw in the video, a lot of images were taken from our office. Our counseling group cycles actually happen in rural communities, meeting survivors where they live and work. And we hold our counseling sessions in community spaces such as churches or schools, which you also saw in the video. And our counselors will travel up to 2 or 3 hours to different regions within northern Uganda so that survivors can have equitable access to mental health care. And as you heard, the scale for this need is quite large, and it's really too large for just one organization. And so that's why one component of our work is also training other organizations to provide trauma counseling. We have a strong partnership with a local university where our staff offer a diploma program in trauma counseling. And we also mentor master level psychology students from this university, Margaret University. Because as we know, when we all work together, the collective impact is just so much greater than what one organization can do alone. So I also want to touch on the COVID-19 pandemic and how that's impacted our work, because it's really impacted our work in unexpected ways. In the beginning, it impacted our work as many of us were interrupted by our normal day-to-day lives. The government imposed restrictions on gathering, and so we did a lot of work over the phone. But that restriction didn't last for long, and we were able to resume our programming pretty safely because all of our activities are conducted in open spaces outside, and we were able to socially distance. But the largest way that the COVID-19 pandemic impacted our work was actually through the lives of our clients, and it really caused more symptoms from existing clients, and then it started a whole new generation of survivors who needed our care, and I'll explain this further. So when women were abducted and they were released, they often had children as their own, like Joan. And now, with schools being closed for nearly 2 years in Uganda, those children are now teenagers, and they weren't in school, and they were more subjected to rape and domestic violence. And now we are finding that they are teenage mothers in need of care. So this year, it will take $800,000 for CBT Uganda to say yes to survivors like Joan and continue working with professionals and furthering their capacity to deliver trauma-informed care. I'd like to thank everyone and welcome any questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I have a few questions in the chat, and I encourage everyone to put their questions in there. The first one is from Mary. She's asking how most of these women and girls escape from the LRA, and how do they then find CVT?
Yeah, so the war has been over for nearly 20 years, but during the war, the government of Uganda, the war was between the Lord's Resistance Army and the government of Uganda. And so during those conflicts, oftentimes the government of Uganda would find girls or women who were captive and release them into internally displaced camps and sort of send them back to their villages to the extent that was possible. A lot of villages were burned down, or people had fled, and so they might have been vacated. But that's, and then another, they would cycle through, the LRA would cycle through because they wanted younger women and children, because they were more susceptible to listening and following and not running away. So that's how people find CVT is we do large community events where we teach everyone about mental health, and then clients are then they come to us. And we also find that current clients will refer future clients. So that is another way too, is just referrals from other past clients raving about services.
Great, thank you. So what is the general response to your work in the villages where you are working?
Yeah, it's largely positive. I think women, when they come in after they've completed their session, I think they're surprised on how much more energy they have. They improved their relationship with their children. And so we really see our work as more than mental health, but actually more community building, and it really impacting the lives of families in addition to just the mothers themselves.
All right, and how many women do you help annually?
About 250 in Uganda.
Okay. You mentioned that it's going to take $800,000 to serve all the women that you want to. Our grant is one piece of that. How do you raise the rest of your funds? Where are you going to get the rest of the money?
Great question. So we have a quite a diverse amount of funding for the Uganda program. One portion of that is funded through the International Criminal Court's trust fund for victims. So that's one grant. And then we have a few other private, larger grants, and then individuals like yourselves. So the Uganda program really relies on individuals. Other programs at CBT are funded with large grants, mostly by the State Department. However, in Uganda, it's mostly funded by private foundations.
Well, we're always interested here that you're funded by the State Department, as we do try to advocate here in the US for US funding of programs for women and girls around the world. So that's good to hear. Someone was asking if you get any support from local governments, either financially or just, encouragement in the work that you're doing. And do you actually seek this government support?
We don't receive any government support from the government of Uganda. But I should say we don't receive financial support, but we do have programmatic support. I was recently on a trip to Uganda in October, and we met with the Ministry of Health, and they were very interested in our work and also wanting to expand our program into primary care centers, because we find that mental health symptoms often present in a physical manner: increased heart rate, sweating, insomnia. So as doctors are more aware of mental health symptoms, they can better recommend mental health treatment.
And what happens after your 10-week sessions? Do the groups continue, or is there any ongoing resources that the women can use?
So there aren't any formal processes that women continue with unless they get re-traumatized, and then they come back for individual counseling sessions. But oftentimes we hear from clients that their friendships continue, which is the point of group cycling, is that torture and trauma is such an isolating experience, and it really makes you feel like you're alone. And so conducting things in a group setting just creates those friendships that continue on. And people now have a built-in support system. So those continue very informally, but we do hear from clients that those continue on.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to rebuild the families when the women might come back and actually be shunned or shamed for, what had happened to them?
Yeah, that's very difficult because oftentimes you're wanting to change a culture or an element of a culture that really becomes at odds with mental health and what you're trying to do. I would say we do that much more on the individual level and not on a policy level. It's quite difficult to answer that. We really work a lot with I think the mother-children relationship and making that as strong as possible, and really building up a support system, finding family members who didn't shun them or who might offer some level of support. Because if everyone's being shunned at the same time, then all of a sudden you have this community of people who's all unfortunately being marginalized, but they can coalesce together and support one another in that way. If you watch the interview that Vina did with our other staff members, you hear this reference by one of our psychotherapists, Martha, and she talks a lot about how the land is really, that's a major barrier for women gaining acceptance in the community, is because their child is now, in addition to they themselves being shunned, women are not allowed land. And so now their children aren't allowed land either, because they were born out of rape and they might not know who their father was. And so they're denied access to land, and they're kind of put at this level of poverty because they aren't able to really break out.
Someone was asking about whether you provide any support for these children of the women who were raped and end up having a child.
Yeah, so we partnered with a shelter called Comboni Samaritan. And so this shelter is doing a lot of work. So we provide the mental health care, and then the shelter provides a safe place for them to stay. But then they also provide some livelihood and economic support. So they train them in any kind of trade that the woman might find interesting: hair braiding, cooking, all different sorts of things. And so they attend a training school for like a year. And then after the year is over, Comboni will give them like a kit to start their own small business. And so it's really great to be able to partner with them. And that's a pretty new partnership. We just started this year. And we're doing the group counseling with the teenage mothers together, which is really great too.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah.
Someone was asking for you to expand a little bit more about how you're training women to be the counselors and building the capacity for these mental health services in the area. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's done in two different ways. So it's done internally by our own professional development given to counselors. Martha, one of the counselors, on the interview, she was actually promoted up from counselor to counseling supervisor to now associate psychotherapist. So that's really great to watch her advance through that. So professional development for our own counselors, but then also the counselors of other organizations. So we offer the Margaret diploma program, which is the only diploma in trauma counseling available in Uganda. And that is delivered by Martha, the psychotherapist trainer who you saw on or who you may see on the interview. And we find that those women so the diploma program is a 2-year program that we teach and is certified by Margaret University. And so through that program, they receive like classroom instruction, but then they also receive counseling supervision, which is very rare. And it's not provided by other organizations or other schools if someone were to go into counseling. And supervision is just a very important component to improving the skills of a counselor. So those are the two different ways we do training.
Just quickly, I don't know if you can comment on this, but people are wondering, like, is the LRA still around in Uganda? How stable is the government? Are these kinds of things still happening to women?
They're not still happening, but the aftermath is still, it was very disruptive, that the aftermath is still very prevalent. The LRA is still around, but it's more in Sudan or South Sudan and not so much in northern Uganda anymore. And it's sort of disbanded into like a smaller group, but they are considered still active.
Well, I think, Lynn, that is all of the questions that we had in the chat.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing many of you at chapter meetings that I've been invited to, or answer any questions further. I can put my email in the chat.
That's great, Sarah. And I'm going to put your website address in the chat as well. All right, Lynn, I'll send it back over to you for our next guest. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, very, very much. Our next speaker, earlier this year, Together Women Rise awarded a $50,000 Impact Partnership Grant to Amplify Girls, a collective made up of 25 partners across East Africa, serving over 60,000 teenage girls and their communities. We're pleased to have Margaret Butler, with us tonight from Amplify Girls. Margaret brings over 15 years of experience working alongside communities in Eastern Africa to support female leaders. Her belief and commitment in uplifting the voices of women to be agents of change in their communities is apparent in all projects she undertakes. After living in Rwanda and working with Partners in Health and the Clinton Foundation on health-related projects, Margaret founded Chimera to support adolescent girls in their community. Chimera was Together Women Rise's featured grantee in December of last year. Margaret is also the co-founder of the East African Girls Leadership Summit, which brings together promising young women from across Eastern Africa to be efficient and effective change managers in the world. Noticing the need for a network of community-based organizations to share best practices and learn to scale ideas, Margaret co-founded Amplify in 2017 alongside 18 other partners in East Africa. Margaret holds a BA from the University of Washington, a bachelor's in education from the University of British Columbia, and a master's in international educational development from Teachers College, Columbia University. And Margaret, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me this evening. It's funny hearing my intro. Sounds like I have a bit of a problem starting things. But I feel like that's a good sign. If you don't mind, is it okay if I share some slides? Is that okay? Okay. Sorry about that. I should have let you know earlier.
No problem. It's just my struggling with the technology here. Let me see.
No worries.
There you go, Margaret.
All right. Awesome. Well, just as my intro said, let me just get myself going here. Okay, so there we go. Just getting myself organized here. All right. So as my intro said, I wanted to start by just giving a little bit of a background on why I do this work. As you mentioned, 15 years ago, I was very privileged to find myself working in healthcare in a rural village in Rwanda. At that point in time, Partners in Health had just started in Rwanda under the invitation of President Kagame. And I was extraordinarily fortunate to find myself working in an incredible community, but also with an incredible organization and an incredible human by the name of Dr. Paul Farmer. He had recently moved there with his family, and I had probably the best global health education one could hope for over a period of 2 years. And as many of you may know, Paul tragically passed away last week, but he taught me and thousands of other people around the world how to think about global development, not just global health, but global development, and how we can interact in communities. That more often than not, the best solutions to the biggest problems can be found within communities and ultimately should be led by the people from those communities. Key to this work is that all of these structures within these communities are linked. Just as we were talking about with the Center for Victims of Torture, you've got to have healthcare, but you've got to have mental health care, but you've got to think about jobs, and you've got to think about education, and you can't have one thing working without the other. And I think that was one of the greatest learnings that I had in this work. And following my work with Partners in Health, I founded Chimera in partnership with local Rwandan activists, because I believe that young women in Rwanda deserve the same quality of education health and support that I had received growing up in Canada. What I learned through this work was that community-based organizations are often pushed to the side as too small and too insignificant. That is not just organizations, I have to say, in Eastern Africa, but I would say it is true to many community-based organizations around the world, even in the United States. And this is especially true. You're often pushed aside, especially if you are an organization that is founded by an African leader, quite frankly. After a decade of working with Comera, I decided that it was time for me to both step aside because I was no longer needed, and also because I wanted to address the system that so many of these small organizations exist within. So I know that Amplified Girls is a little bit of a change from what you're used to. We are working in the systems space. So I thought, what if at the end of 10 years, I've met incredible organizations across Eastern Africa and thought, what if we could all come together and start talking about the work that we're doing, start sharing the work, the programs that we're doing, start talking about interventions that are working instead of sort of working in these silos, right? This competitive world. I'm sure maybe you've even often wondered that, listening to your partners presenting each month and thinking, gosh, I wonder if, X organization has talked to this organization. And I was really grappling with that idea, and also with the idea of, well, what does scale really mean? When we talk about scale, we think of, one organization addressing one problem, expanding across multiple countries. And I thought, that can work really, really well in certain circumstances. But, what if we were to rethink the idea of scale that is inclusive of community-based organizations and honors the really contextually relevant work that they are doing, and holds that true, but creates a sort of umbrella movement, recognizing that we're stronger together and focusing on outcomes of organizations rather than activities. So we are a collective of community-driven organizations working to localize global development and invest in adolescent girls. The organizations that we've brought together are organizations that have girl serving programs. You'll recognize a number of them. In fact, I'll go to the next slide here if I can. You'll recognize Wiser, Comera, Sega, Girls School. I believe that's part of your trip to Tanzania. So we were founded by 18 community-driven organizations in Eastern Africa. We are also governed by those 18 organizations. So we are a partner-led organization. We wanted to also challenge traditional systems of power, right? That we wanted to make sure that those who were doing the work also held the power position, the seat. So we have 12 members currently who make up our board of directors. And in 2021, we expanded to 25 organizations working in Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya. So how do we do this work? We have a 3-pillar format. So what we said is, okay, we really want organizations to be able to share best practices or promising practices with one another. What are you doing? How are you doing it? And we believe that they have such a wealth of knowledge to share with one another, and they want to, and they're excited to do this type of sharing across platforms. So actually everyone coming online on Zoom has actually been really advantageous because we've been able to share across countries, right? People from Uganda are sharing from people with you in Rwanda and Tanzania, what it is that they're doing. We also provide capacity strengthening support. So like helping organizations with their own fundraising, helping them with their financial systems, making connections to funders for them, helping them with their strategic plans, all of the things that passionate people who start nonprofits forget about. that they need to have in their wheelhouse, right? A lot of nonprofits are started by incredibly passionate people who care about a cause or care about an issue, but then when they get into the driver's seat, realize, wow, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I need to know and learn pretty quickly. And so our role as Amplify, as our team, is to support those organizations to bolster their systems and create this fabric of support and trust. Trust is a value of ours that we hold very near and dear. We move at the speed of trust. We invest deeply in our partners. Another key piece of our work is our research work. So we call it Demonstrate. Under Demonstrate, we say, well, you know, and one of the big questions that people often say to community-based organizations is, where's your data? You know, you don't exist until you have good data and you can prove the work that you're doing. And, you know, with a small organization, with a small staff and limited funding, that's really hard. And so we support organizations with their own monitoring and evaluation systems, but we've also said to them, well, collectively, what do you want to measure? How do you want to measure this impact of this big group? And the organizations came together and said, well, we believe that if every single girl from all of our organizations, if she is to show or is able to improve her agency and show that she has agency in her life, then we have been successful in our jobs. And so over the last 3 years, we've developed a tool that measures agency that all of the organizations are using to demonstrate their impact and to demonstrate this sort of collective impact. And we just had results come in, and on average, all of our partners are increasing agency in adolescent girls. And our hope is to then draw down on that research and sort of say, okay, what are the programs that are really effective in agency, and how can other organizations use them? And then a final part of our cycle is advocate. So advocacy is really important. We are at the UN, we are in global forums advocating for the voices of community-based organizations to be present at decision-making tables. Historically, global development has been very top-down. You know, they use communities as tools for development instead of saying, well, what is it that you want to do within your own community? Again, I think that this is a global issue, but it is an imperative for this work to be able to advocate collectively, to be able to drive funding towards these incredible organizations that you have been supporting for for a very long time. And so our role is really to take this research, demonstrate that organizations are doing really effective work, and be able to drive resources towards them. And then I'll give you a quick example here of how we do this work. So in COVID-19, we did a 4-country research project, qualitative research project, interviewing over 400 girls in communities. And what you were saying about Uganda that we found is that girls are severely traumatized post-pandemic. I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but Uganda suffered, you know, one of the longest school closures in the world, the longest school closure in the world, I should say, almost 2 years of no school. And so the instances of teenage pregnancy have skyrocketed. And all of our partners participated in the research, and we found this to be the case across all 4 countries. You know, our partners didn't have the capacity to be able to do a research project of this scale, but we were able to do it in partnership with them and demonstrated the huge impact that COVID was having on girls, and also what girls wanted to move forward. And the number one thing that they wanted was the ability to be able to return to school and to have the resources to be able to return to school. And so we took that research and said, okay, now we're going to move to the next piece and try and get funding to get girls back into school. And my colleague Auburn is going to be presenting actually on Sunday about this research that we did in the Girls Education and Innovation Fund, where we were able to quickly raise money and disseminate it to these organizations who are providing deep contextually relevant support to these young women, whether it be through traditional education, whether it be through vocational training. It really, it differs. There is a huge variety of interventions that are happening, but it's happening quickly. So that just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of like how we do our work currently. And we're moving like a variety of different projects forward on research, on advocacy, and really driving this message home that development should be localized. We should be honoring the knowledge and power and deep connections that community-based organizations hold, and really letting them move and supporting them to move into the global driver's seat to really drive the indicators on global poverty and how we can really, I guess, sort of overall improve the global development mechanism. So that is a brief snapshot of Amplify Girls, and I will stop share right now. I hope I didn't go on too long, but I'm happy to take any questions.
That was great, Margaret. And yes, I do want to remind everyone that your colleague, Aubryn, we'll be talking much more about the research and the fund and what the actions that you're taking to try and get girls back to school that have been out of school due to the pandemic. So please make sure that you're signed up for that. Always like to get a plug in there. Yeah. So the first question that we have is, you talked a little bit about this idea of girls having agency and how that was a goal of all your partners, that every girl that they are working with should be able to have agency in her life. Can you talk a little bit more about that and specifically how you do measure this?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the cool thing about this work is that also historically research has been very extractive in communities. People come in, they do the research, they leave. And one thing that we really want to address is how do we build tools for research in partnership with communities? And so over the last 2 years, we actually built this tool in partnership with leaders of these organizations. And so how we measure agency is a set of positive self-beliefs and a set of skills that girls can take action on with those beliefs. And so it is a 65 question survey that girls take through their organizations that is then data crunched and provided to the organizations, and they receive an agency score. And then they receive support on, if they need specific areas to improve on or build upon, they receive support on that. So it really was a generative process with our partners. It's been translated into multiple languages and gone through multiple rounds of, how different communities think about agency and how they define it themselves as well.
And were there some commonalities in terms of the areas that you needed to work with and support the girls on? Were there particular findings in the research said, oh, we really need to offer support here?
No, I mean, it's our first round of longitudinal research is just coming in right now. So it hasn't come to us to support the girls specifically. Again, we are there to support the organizations who are working
right.
with the girls. And so, one of the things that we are still struggling with and figuring out is how different environments impact girls' agency as a factor. So you could have, so much agency, but be living in one of the most hostile environments. That has a huge, huge impact on a girl's agency. And so what we're trying to now figure out is how does that impact girls' agency, and what does that look like? We've actually been invited to start looking at working with organizations in India as well to use this tool and to support local organizations there. And that's actually part of our next phase of work, is really drawing down on like how is, so, this organization is really strong in leadership skills. Why are they really strong in leadership skills? How can we share that with other organizations in order to improve leadership skills within organizations or within
This
girls?
is really innovative work, and you guys, it sounds like you're breaking ground here, and glad to hear you're sharing it with other countries. And really excited that our Together Women Rise community is part of it. I have another question here about, and once again, this may be more for your specific partners, but with the increasing teen pregnancy, is this an area that Amplify is going to focus on, or your partner agencies focusing on, to try and develop preventive information and support for the girls?
Yeah, I mean, what we found is one of the most important programmatic interventions that impacts girls' agency is healthcare, and that is an imperative. And girls, teen pregnancy is right at the top of that. And so we are actually right now developing shared indicators around like how to measure health outcomes for adolescent girls. And with that will come, so, on a monthly basis, we have communities of practice conversations as well. So a high focus on the healthcare piece is how organizations support teen mothers, and also how they work on prevention as well. And that is inclusive of working with boys too. But this fund that we started, that Auburn will be talking about, really is to support teen mothers and helping them build or to advocate, or organizations to advocate for girls to have re-entry mechanisms back into school, so that they don't feel like their lives are over. We do a lot of advocacy in countries around that. We were supporting our partners actually just recently in Uganda, where they were advocating with the ministry and the government to allow teen mothers to return back to school and support their return, both young women who had already given birth and young women who were pregnant, to be able to return to school. They were not before the pandemic, and now they are actually allowed to return to school. Same thing in Tanzania. They just changed last year, where I'm sure you've heard about this previously. Young mothers or girls who had delivered babies or who had gotten pregnant were not allowed to return to school. And last year, because of the advocacy of local organizations, the government, and a change in president to a female president, helped the fact that young women could return to school. So yes, we definitely have our advocacy arm that is working both locally and globally on this issue, and then also supporting organizations programmatically as well.
Last question is, hold on, I lost it now. No, I have to find it. Oh, last question is about, what happens with the kids when the girls do go back to school? Are the grandmothers watching the children?
Yeah, actually, one of our partners who just reported on one of the sub grants that we provided was a picture, and we looked at this picture and I thought, that's an interesting picture. It doesn't look like teen moms. And she said, no, it's all the grandmothers holding the babies as the mothers have gone back to school. So what we found is that is typically the case, is once the mother is ready, the child is left in family care, and that is typically what happens. But a lot of actually teen mothers feel so much pressure returning to traditional education. They feel so behind that there has been a deep investment in vocational training too. So shorter programs where they can go for 6 months to a year, receive a vocational skill set that supports them to generate income and move on with their lives.
Well, certainly COVID is impacting all aspects of the communities, and derailing the plans that these young girls maybe had for their lives initially. And I I wouldn't be the communications person I am if I didn't remind everyone, please, please sign up for our International Women's Day event on Sunday, March the 6th, starting at 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific time. And I have put the registration link in the chat. Please, please join us. I have had the opportunity to talk a little bit with Auburn Margaret, and she seems awesome. And we also have with us an excellent speaker from the UN Women who is going to give us, UN Women is doing phenomenal work in collecting data and reporting on the broad picture of what has happened with gender equality during COVID. And we will also hear from another past grantee, Asia Initiatives, Dr. Gita Mehta. So that and a little bit of music as well. It's going to be an awesome event. So please, please join us on Sunday. And at that, I'm going to say thank you to Margaret and turn it back over to Lynn.
Okay, I'll be quick. Just to thank you everyone for coming tonight. Margaret and Sarah, wonderful presentations. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Wendy. Very well done. Again, I personally am ecstatic. Beverly's here. Back to my script now. Together Women Rise depends on your donations to fund projects like the one you learned about tonight, as well as all of our education and engagement activities. You can go to our website, togetherwomenrise.org, to make a single donation or set up a monthly giving and support Together Women Rise's work all year round. As Wendy has told you, we have International Women's Day. If you check out our website, you'll also see we have our advocacy group webinar on March 15th, and our book club is March 29th at 8 p.m. We'll be discussing the book Breath, Eyes, and Memory, and the author will be there. Again, we look forward to seeing you at future events, and thank each of you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Margaret and Sarah. Great presentations.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Good night. Thank you. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Wendy.
How are you?
I'm doing.
Wasn't that cool? Margaret's Canadian.
I know. And I just pinged her and I said, thank you so much, because that just makes sense to have this organization. I think they named it absolutely spot on. I mean, Amplify. I was really impressed, and it's
I know. So is
what I've been thinking. But I said, hey, coming to you from Kelowna, and she said, she was on Bowen Island off of Vancouver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. Hey, and we head to Canmore on Saturday, and we're going, and I'm so sad I'm going to miss International Women's Day, but we're going for.
Well, they have internet in Canmore.
Well, but we're at a race. We're actually, my cousin is racing in this international cross-country ski race, and there's like 700